In this video, I'd like to talk about word problems with sequences. So, Olivia read a book. She started on page 20, and each minute she read 3 pages. Let G of n be the page Olivia was on at the beginning of the nth minute. So, we need to determine what kind of sequence this is and write an explicit formula for that sequence. So, before we answer the questions, let's just try to generate the sequence. And at the beginning of the first minute, she was on page 20. So that's when n is equal to 1. This is our G of n value. And she's reading 3 pages every minute. So at the beginning of the second minute, she's on page 23. At the beginning of the third minute, she's on page 26, and so on. This looks to be an arithmetic sequence, since we're adding the same amount every time. We're just adding 3. So remember, this is what we call our common difference. And since this is additive, like I mentioned, we know this is arithmetic. Now we just need to come up with an explicit formula. And remember, explicit formulas are useful for finding any specific term in the sequence. And the explicit formula for these arithmetic sequences, let's just write out the general form of this. We always start with the first term, and then we're going to add that common difference, which let's just call that D in the general formula. We're going to add that n minus 1 times. So with this general form, we can just match up with what we know. We know the first term is 20, and we know the common difference is 3. So for us, we have G of n is equal to 20 plus 3 times n minus 1. And we can check this. We can test that this works correctly since, let's say we know the fourth term, G of 4, that should be 29. So if we plug that into our formula here, G of 4 would be 20 plus 3 multiplied by 4 minus 1, which is just 3. So this is 20 plus 9, which is 29. So we got what we expected, which means we can feel confident that this is the correct explicit formula. So this will go into our box right here. Now let's do another problem like this. We have Naledi, and I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but she climbed up a mountain. Her initial altitude was 40 meters above sea level, and it increased by 10 meters each hour. So let G of n be Naledi's altitude at the beginning of the nth hour of her climb. So we need to find what kind of sequence it is, and in this one, we need to find the recursive formula. So just like the last one, let's first generate what the sequence is just by thinking it through. So let's say that's our term value. Here's our G of n. Let's just make a quick table. And for our first term, or at the beginning of the first hour, she was 40 meters above sea level, so positive 40. And then each hour, it increased by 10 meters. So at the beginning of the second hour, she was at 50. At the beginning of the third hour, she was at 60, and so on. So we can see that this is arithmetic, since we are adding a fixed amount every time. In fact, in this case, our common difference is 10. We're just adding 10 to go from one term to the next. And let's remind ourselves what the general recursive formula looks like. So recursive formulas always start with our first term, G of 1, and then give a pattern to find the next term, essentially, or to find any term in the sequence. So to find the nth term, you take the term before that, the n minus 1 term, and then you add that common difference, which in this case we can just call D. So D, that's our common difference, which in our case we found to be equal to 10. So we can just match this up with what we know. So we know G of 1, that is 40. Since at the beginning of the first hour, she was 40 meters above sea level. And the pattern would just be g of n. So to find the nth term, you take the term before it, g of n minus 1, and then you add that common difference, in this case, which is 10. So this is what we think is the correct answer, but let's do a quick check. And we can just find the second term using our new formula. Since we know that g of 2, it should be 50. So plugging that into our formula, we're just setting n equal to 2 here. So g of 2 would be 2 minus 1 inside these parentheses, so you get g of 1 plus 10. And we know the first term, that's 40, and 40 plus 10, that is 50. So we checked our work, which means we can feel confident that this formula here for our recursive formula is correct. And so g of 1, we'd put 40 into the box here, and you'd select plus 10 here.